touch the sky. Tonight we're coming alive.
But this time I'm doing something a little different. I'm doing a bonus video of the Stanley Parables. This is taking a look at...
This is the story of a man named Stanley.
We're looking
Stanley
at
worked
the
for a company in a
Half-Life
big
2
building where
mod.
he was employee number 427.
We
Employee
briefly
number
saw
427's
this
job was simple. He sat at his
at
desk
the
in room
end
427 and
of...
he pushed buttons on a keyboard. Orders came to him through a monitor next
We
to
briefly
his
saw
desk,
this at the
telling
end of
him what
one of
buttons
the
to
endings,
push,
the
how
game's
long to
ending,
push them,
I
and in
believe.
what order. This is what employee 427 did every day of every month of every year. And although others might have considered it soul-rending, Stanley relished every moment that the orders came in, as though he had been made exactly for this job. And Stanley was happy. And then one day something very peculiar happened. Something that would forever change Stanley. Something he would never quite forget. He had been at his desk for nearly an hour when he realized that not one single order had arrived on a monitor for him to follow. No one had showed up to give him instructions, call a meeting, or even say hi. Never in all his years at the company had
By the way,
happened,
I'm Iron Man.
this complete isolation. Something was very clearly wrong. Shocked, frozen solid, Stanley found himself unable to move the longest time. But as he came to his wits and regained his senses, he got up from his desk and walked out into the hallway.
Yeah, so I'm going to just be... since this is the Gary's mod thing, I am going to be going around with... There we go. I'll go around with the camera. So
Stanley decided to go to the staff lounge to check on his co-workers.
Yeah.
He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others, so the thought of total solitude was terrifying to him.
Yeah, so I'm going to be looking. I'm going to go play through one of the a few of the endings
When Stanley came to a set of two open
and show
doors,
the difference
he entered
between
the door on his left.
between this one and the other and the standalone version, as this is the Half-Life 2 mod, as I've
As
already
Stanley entered the
said.
lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there.
Yeah, as you can see, the lounge isn't actually in the same place as before. The lounge is actually on the left path instead of the right path.
Coming to a staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office.
I'll show the original ending first.
Entering his manager's office, Stanley was once again stunned to discover not an indication of any human life. It was at this point that he began to feel dizzy and a little sick, and even thought he might pass out when suddenly he noticed a keypad next to the filing cabinet in the corner of his boss's office.
Very obvious.
Stanley had never seen this panel before and had no idea what combination of numbers would produce any result. In fact, only Stanley's boss knew this, since the panel withheld access to the boss's greatest, darkest secret, and so he had assigned the keypad a combination that only he could possibly know: the number of his freshman dorm number in college, 1957. But of course, Stanley couldn't possibly have known this.
7.
Yet incredibly, by simply pushing random buttons on the keypad, Stanley happened to input the correct code by sheer luck. Amazing. Stanley ventured forth into the newly opened passageway. As he drew deeper into the bowels of the building, Stanley had no idea where he was or what this place held. And just as he began to think he might not discover a thing, he emerged into a long room to find rows and rows of monitors, screens with a number above it. Stanley noticed, however, that these were not random numbers, but the number of employees who worked in the building.
They are quite random because there's
Even his
only
own number, 427, had
200.
a place on the wall.
There's like
But why a setup so elaborate, he asked.
6
Was
of
this simple surveillance
200,
or something even more?
6 of 400,
And as if in
6 of
answer to his
500.
question, the wall slid open before him, revealing the ultimate truth of the situation. An enormous control panel, Stanley discovered, but not one that controlled simple machinery. Buttons were labeled with emotions: happy, sad. Levers and knobs controlled actions: walking, eating, doing work, or watching TV. Every input on this device monitored not the functions of a machine, but of a human being. And the reality began to sink in. Stanley, like so many other people, reduced to images on a monitor, had been under someone's control, always at the mercy of this machine. Could this have been the only reason employee number 427 was content with his boring job? That a machine had altered his emotions to accept it blindly? He began to feel an unbridled rage, and at the peak of his anger, something happened. A spark. Stanley looked up and saw the generator
Glad to see
overhead,
them
still providing some small amount of power to the machine, keeping it alive.
still like has that.
And knowing that this generator was all that kept the controls running, Stanley moved to the ladder in the back of the room and began to climb towards the rafters.
Right. Now, I believe
The
since
higher
this is
Stanley
only
climbed, the closer he felt
a download to the
the
mod,
further from enslavement.
I believe that it won't automatically restart me at the end of this, so yeah.
Blackness, power gone, all alone. And then... As he stepped through the door into the fresh outside air, a feeling of liberation rushed through Stanley's body. He had seen power, he had seen enslavement, and he had destroyed it. The underling was in control now. He had found his leading role. Stanley never discovered why everyone had gone missing, nor how and when he had come under the machine's control. But it didn't upset him terribly, because he knew that this was how things were meant to happen. All he felt was a delight unlike any he had ever known before. Never again would he follow someone else's orders without question. Never again would anyone tell Stanley where to go, what to do, or how to feel. No more bosses, no more instructions on a screen. Stanley decides for himself now. And he stepped out into the world, and he felt the cool breeze upon his skin, and Stanley was happy.
Yeah, so I don't think it will restart me back in the office, so... Oh yeah. Bye. And I'm back. Now we're going to go and do a different
check on his co-workers.
ending.
He never functioned well by himself and constantly needed support and guidance from others. So the thought of when Stanley came to a set of two open doors, he entered the door on his left.
Yeah, I should probably not try and overrun it. But yeah, let's go downwards this time.
As Stanley entered the lounge, he was horrified to find not a single person here. He decided he would walk up to see his boss, hoping that he would find an answer there.
Yeah, I'll try not to
Coming
break
to a
the map.
staircase, Stanley walked upstairs to his boss's office. But Stanley just couldn't do it. He considered the possibility of facing his boss, of admitting that he had left his post during work hours. He might be fired for that. And in such a competitive economy, was it really worth taking that risk? All because he believed everyone had disappeared? His boss would think he was crazy. And then something occurred to Stanley. Maybe, he thought to himself, maybe I am crazy. Everyone I know simply vanishing out of the blue, there's almost no other explanation for it. And a nagging fear began to creep up in his mind. Questions that had been there all along. He just hadn't put his finger on them yet. For example, why couldn't he see his feet when he looked down?
Yeah.
Why did doors close automatically behind him wherever he went? And for that matter, these rooms were starting to look pretty familiar. Was he just walking around in circles? Where am I, he thought. And the more he found himself unable to answer these questions, the more questions continued to arise, until he came to the issue that had been slowly boiling until he could ignore it no longer. Why is there a voice in my head, dictating everything that I'm doing
Yeah,
and thinking?
Nathan, why are you in my head?
Suddenly, every door slammed shut. "No!" Stanley screamed. "I need to get out of here. I need to know that there's something out there. I need to know it's not just all in my head." And he screamed and clutched at his skull as the voice grew harsher and the music in the background rose higher and higher. And then, moments before collapsing to the ground, Stanley clenched his fists and screamed to anyone who might be listening, "I'm not real! I'm not real! Don't believe any of it! None of it's real!" And then everything went black. This is the story of a woman named Mariella. Mariella woke up on
That's
a day
another
like any other.
Friends.
She got dressed, went to work, clocked in, clocked out, and then
It's
she
very,
walked home.
it's shorter than
But her
the
walk on this day was interrupted by
standalone
the
version,
body of a
and
man
this,
who had stumbled through
and this is
town
using
talking
Half-Life
and
2
screaming
models,
to
obviously.
himself, and then collapsed dead on the sidewalk. Moments after seeing him, she would turn, run to the nearest police station, and call for an ambulance. But for just a few brief seconds, she merely stood there, unable to move. The tragedy was not the death of a single person. It was that she would never know this man's story, never hear in his
I've
own words
never
what
really
had
got
happened
that.
to him,
Why?
or what he believed had happened to him. For to know these things would be to exist inside the head of the man himself. So all she could do was observe from a distance and pity him. But Mariella had places to be and people to meet with, very important people, whose impressions of her would affect her career and indeed
Also,
the
clipping
rest
at the
of
edge
her
of
life.
the pictures.
She stood there
At the end
for
of
only a
the
moment,
images.
looking down at the body, and then she ran.
And I'll see you for another ending in a second, folks. Alright, and we're back.
Stanley decided to go to the staff lounge to check on his co-workers. He never functioned well by himself.
Yeah, we
And constantly needed support and
fell
guidance
through the
from others,
roof
so the
about
thought of total solitude was terrifying to him.
here. About
When
in
Stanley
the...
came to a set of two
in
open
here.
doors, this was not the correct way to the employee lounge, and Stanley knew it perfectly well. So he turned left at the first open door and walked back in the right direction.
And you can see that there's no other option through there. There's just go back to the right doorway.
Stanley was so bad at following directions, it's incredible he wasn't fired years ago. Maybe this is why everyone had left. No one wanted to be around someone as bad at listening as him. And since he was walking into the middle of nowhere and thus ruining the entire story, Stanley decided that he would punish himself. So when he came to the elevator and the doors opened, he stepped inside and pushed the button to go up.
So
Oh, Stanley. You know, You really aren't going anywhere, and I don't say that deceitfully. I truthfully mean that there isn't a story down here. The story was back up where I told you to go in the first place. Right now, you're just running around looking at empty halls. And frankly, that's perhaps even more infuriating for me.
Oh, God.
So why don't you throw me a bone, give me a chance, and just let me tell the story I want to tell,
Oops. Yeah, I shouldn't play around with the physics gun.
Now listen carefully. This is important. Stanley walked through the red door.
Blue.
Aha, perhaps you misunderstood. Stanley walked through the red door.
Blue.
I still don't think we're communicating properly. Stanley walked through the red door. All right, fine. Go ahead, Stanley. You want to know so badly what's out there? You want to find out what lies at the end of this road you've chosen? Well, don't let me stop you. No one's even built this section of the map because you were never supposed to be here in the first place. It's just a bunch of skybox and dev wall textures. That's it. Is this what you were looking for? Was
No
it worth
clipping.
ruining the story I'd written out for you?
There you
I put a lot of time into that, and now well, here you are now, just looking at nothing. To think that that's all I needed to make in the first place, just a whole lot of nothing, and you would have been happy. Well, hey, you still need a little something to do. Am I right? Here, let me load up another map. See if there's something in here that'll keep you occupied. Ah, here's one. Let's boot this up. We'll see if you like it.
I think I may have broken it up a bit. So, yeah, I'm just gonna go back through the red door. There we go.
Good, good. Now, if you don't mind, there's something I'd like to show you. But to do that, I think it would be best for us to start from the beginning. This is a very sad story about the death of a man named Stanley. Stanley worked for a company in a big building where he was employee number 427. His job pushing buttons demanded little of him, so there was not much of himself to give, and in this way, Stanley's job felt less and less like his every day. But if buttons need pushing one day, it means they'll need pushing the next and then the next. So, without question or judgment, Stanley continued to do what the screen told him. One keystroke flowed into another keystroke, flowed into his ride home, flowed into dinner, flowed into waking up, flowed into going to work, and here he was again. Stanley was typing out a complete sentence that said absolutely nothing at all. If in reality no one ever actually disappeared from the office, and Stanley never got the opportunity to make a decision, to choose which path he wanted to take, would his life still have any meaning? Perhaps when we long for something deeply enough, these hopes and fantasies become so strong in our minds that we truly believe that we're there, controlling that person and living that adventure. To manipulate your own thoughts and emotions might mean freedom from a self-imposed prison, but these delusions can be fatal to those who can't tell the difference. And so, Stanley asked, if that door never opened, if I'll never be able to walk away from those people and from these buttons, is this life still worth experiencing? Am I actually happy? Stanley answered this question by pushing a button. Then he pushed a button, and then he pushed a button. Then he pushed a button. Then he pushed a button.
Okay. Well, I think that's enough for today. That has been the bonus video for the Stanley Parables. I hope you've had a good time watching. Goodbye.